Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Monday, February 27th, 2017. We've got ourselves a nice little 7-game slate to start off the new week. Hope you guys had a great weekend. The slates have been tough. I got to say on DraftKings. DraftKings has been a lot sharper with their pricing in general. They're not really giving you the gimmies that we're accustomed to. Basically, in the past, we've seen DraftKings kind of not be quick enough or not be predictive enough to raise prices on these certain value guys or guys that we know are going to play mega minutes. And lately, since the All-Star break, they've been really, really actually sharp at adjusting these prices. And we're not getting those bargains that we used to get anymore. Cash games aren't as easy as they used to be, at least not when this pricing is like this. This is when you see things like this happen, this is when the sharps, the professionals, this is when they separate themselves from the rest of the pack. At this point in the season, I think everybody kind of caught on to playing these cheap, minimum salary guys whenever there's an injury news out or whatever the case is. So now you can still do that, but you're going to have to do it for late news that was announced the day of, because if it was something that was announced the day before, DraftKings might have smartened up to it and changed the price. And that's not something that we've seen them do in the past. In fact, we've seen a lot of these quote-unquote sharp people criticize DraftKings for not being able to adjust their prices quick enough and I guess kind of making it a little easier for people in cash games. And they, at least for now, that seems to be no more. So we got a few things to talk about today, but it's not as easy. There's not as many standout, lock and load plays. Like, okay, so for even we take a guy like Corey Joseph with Kyle Lowry out. The first night Kyle Lowry was out, he's missed 2 games in a row. The first night he was out, Corey Joseph was just dirt cheap. Second night, he got bumped up to like 40 something, which is still, not bad. Last night he was 5,400 or something like that. Last night he was 45. Today he's 5,400 or 52 is something crazy to pay for a guy like him. That's a chance. So just be aware that obviously, as usual, late news is typically the best news. So we're still going to want to wait for that late news and hope we find a good, a good value opens up that maybe, majority of the public won't have time to switch to. But yeah, we got a lot to get through. So we're going to have to be, it's not as easy. It's not as easy of a plug and play. Even the stars and scrubs approach that used to be pretty easy when you adjust for some of this injury news and rest news, whatever, that doesn't appear to be the case anymore. And it's more important now than ever to make sure that you're available prior to lock, because you have to be able to adjust to that late news. That's the only way you're going to get that edge back, because DraftKings seems to be on the ball, at least for now, with their pricing. Anyway, we're going to start off by talking about some of the injuries. We're going to start off with Kyle Korver, who is questionable with the knee against Milwaukee. I think he hurt himself in the last contest. So if Kyle Korver can't go, I think you could look at a guy like Iman Shumpert, who's pretty cheap as a possible value spot. Is he somebody I'm dying to play? No. In cash games, he would be the way I go, just because his minutes appear to be more secure, I think, if Kyle Korver is out. Now, before Kyle Korver kind of started getting going, because he's been playing very well lately. Before he got it going, Iman Shumpert was playing, 30 to 35 minutes a game. So I think that if Kyle Korver can't go, I think we'll see Shumpert return to that role with playing those mega minutes again. LeBron James is questionable. He was diagnosed, and he did miss the last game, and they said he was ill. He was diagnosed with strep throat. That's pretty savage. So I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens with LeBron. I think that if LeBron does play, I think he's in play. I mean, I wouldn't put him in cash games if he's sick. Maybe he can have the old Jordan flu game, maybe, but I don't know. I'd be surprised if he plays. The guy has strep throat. I wouldn't play him. Then again, without him, they did get blown out by the Bulls, who are on the back end of a back-to-back. So I don't know who said it, but I thought I saw a funny tweet the other day about somebody, some DFS player somewhere was saying something about if Boogie and Kyrie were on the same team, and they were the 2 studs, they'd be like the only team that had 2 All-Stars with an 0-82 record. And as messed up as that might be to hear, it seems to be true. We've seen that this was Kyrie's team for a long time, and they never really did anything without LeBron. And we see with Boogie and on the Kings for years, he did nothing. But But anyway, if LeBron James does not play, I think we can once again kind of go to the well on Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving. He's priced up now. He's 9K, so you're not getting that gimme. If he don't hit 45, you paid too much for him. And 45, it doesn't seem like it's too bad for a guy like Kyrie. And I definitely think here's the thing: if LeBron plays, I'm not touching Kyrie at 9K, not even against Milwaukee. If LeBron sits out, then you might have to consider a guy like Kyrie. But the thing is that there's already a couple guys that you might have your eyes on who we will talk about. So because of his price, I don't know if he's a must-play, even if LeBron is out. Then again, they are home. It's a pace-up spot. Playing a young team, they're going to need to move quick. So I definitely wouldn't rule Kyrie out. Either way, Kyrie is going to be a great tournament play today. So we'll keep that in mind. Also, keep in mind the Cavs did, supposedly today, they were supposed to pick up Darren Williams. We don't know if he's going to play. Even if he does play, I highly doubt he's going to play anything significant. He knows nothing about their system. And I think he was literally supposed to sign Monday. So I highly, highly doubt that he'd end up playing. Anyway, moving on. Kyle Lowry is questionable with his wrist injury. So I did a little research. I dug into this Kyle Lowry situation because yesterday I thought it was a pretty pivotal move. Even though I did not do well yesterday, I did play DeRozan. Anyway, from what I understand, it's a sore wrist, I think, but it's a lot more. I guess it's more serious than they thought it was going to be. I don't want to say serious because it's not like I don't think it's a situation where he's going to need surgery. I think he just needs rest and to not use it. But yeah, apparently it's something that, from what seemed like, it's just one game he'll be out. This could be something that kind of lingers for a little while. Now they have Ibaka there, so they have a guy to kind of pick up the slack while Lowry sits. So I would be very surprised if Lowry did play today. And I think DraftKings is thinking something similar because they did price, as I mentioned before, they did price Corey Joseph at $5,200. I'm sorry, that's what it was, $5,200, which I think is way too expensive to pay for a guy like that. Could he do it? Sure, but I think it's too expensive. So obviously, if Lowry is out, we did see Ibaka get a significant boost, and this matchup is actually pretty good for Ibaka, especially when we don't know if Porzingis is going to play. KP6 is questionable with an ankle. When he first went down, they said he would miss several days. He got ruled out in their last contest, which I think it was Saturday. I'm not positive. And then all of a sudden, there's like, he's ruled out, but he could play Monday. So I guess we're going to have to pay attention. I was just assuming he wasn't going to play. But it seems like he might actually give it a go. So we don't know. I don't think he's going to play. But he's questionable. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. So I think that if whether Porzingis plays or not, I think Ibaka is in a very good matchup. I think that the Knicks struggle against bigs, particularly power forwards and centers. And I think that a guy like Ibaka can kind of bully his way through Hernan Gomez. I think the only guy they could really match up with a guy successfully besides Porzingis would be like Kyle O'Quinn. But then again, if Porzingis is out, we've seen with Porzingis out, Melo kind of takes that 4. So that would mean we'd have Ibaka and Melo. So that would be it'd be an interesting matchup to watch. It'd be fun for me to watch. But as far as fantasy value, I don't know. Ibaka had a pretty big game yesterday. So I don't know if I'd be dying to go back to him because one thing about Ibaka that I've struggled with him personally is consistency. And yeah, I don't know. He's in a good matchup on paper. Obviously, the obvious play that everybody knows about is DeMar DeRozan. DeMar DeRozan is 8.9K on DraftKings. Now, I think over the difference between tonight and the last 2 nights is that the last 2 nights, DeMar DeRozan was kind of an obvious cash game play just because his usage is ridiculous without Lowry. And now they do have Ibaka, who did take some of that usage away last night. But it's still, I think his usage is in the 40s, so it's ridiculous. It's still DeRozan's team. They're still going to run it through DeRozan. So 8.9 is expensive. But this is a situation where he could actually go a little bit overlooked just because we have so many other guys. We're still waiting to hear, obviously, Kyrie Irving, who's 1,000 more expensive. Kyrie Irving is home. He's in a pace-up spot. People love to play Kyrie. He put up like a 50-burger last time in the last game without LeBron. So I think if LeBron is out, I think a guy like Kyrie could take attention away from DeRozan. I think a guy like Isaiah Thomas, in my opinion, who's in a better spot than DeRozan to begin with. So we don't know for sure. I mean, it seems to me like shooting guard is pretty strange today. I mean, obviously you got James Harden. James Harden did get his shooting guard eligibility back. I think everybody's going to be happy about that. I know there was a lot of ranting and raving going on when they took it away. And from myself, too, I didn't understand why they would do that. It was pretty, I was pretty bummed. He doesn't even start as a point guard. He starts as a shooting guard 9 times out of 10. So glad to see him back with his shooting guard eligibility. But yeah, I think DeMar DeRozan is a guy because, you got Klay Thompson. Now, listen, this is all impinged on injury news. As of right now, I think DeRozan is going to be mega chalky. But if we hear that Kevin Durant is out, if we hear that, I forgot who else, LeBron James is out, that could change. He may not be so chalky. And I can tell you right now, the Knicks are a terrible defensive team. There's really nobody to stop a guy like DeRozan from scoring. And DeRozan is a jump shooter. And Madison Square Garden, which is where this game is going to be playing, has been known to be extremely friendly to jump shooters. So I think that a guy like DeRozan could really bounce back. I haven't checked his back-to-back stats. I don't know why I didn't check it, but I'll have to check that after the pod and just to kind of see for myself. Joakim Noah is questionable with a hamstring. I think he's more on the doubtful side. I highly doubt he plays. So you can look at a guy like Hernan Gomez. You can look at Kyle O'Quinn. Hernan Gomez is $6,800. That's way too expensive for me to pay for a guy like that. Who's really not established in this league. Kyle O'Quinn is $52. To be honest, I think that's too expensive for him too. But I think you could give it a go. I don't understand how you raise a guy from 43 up to 52 for really no reason. But again, that's DraftKings. They're trying to smarten up because they figure he's going to get more playing time with that Porzingis. And even though that hasn't always been the case, actually, no. That's pretty much been the case because Porzingis only missed one game. He went down against Cleveland, and then O'Quinn ended up playing 19 minutes. And then against Philly, O'Quinn played 25. So if he's going to get another 25 minutes, I think this is okay. I'm not really afraid of Valanciunas down low. The thought of Ibaka worries me a little bit defensively, but Ibaka and O'Quinn, they seem to me like similar players as far as like a physicalness, you know what I mean? Like obviously Ibaka's a better jump shooter, but I think that O'Quinn and Ibaka can really bang it out down low. So it's going to be interesting to see the starting lineup today. We've seen them in the past without Porzingis put Melo at the 4. However, what they could do, and I think what they might have, I don't remember for sure, they might have did this against Philly, but they could start Hernan Gomez at the 5, put O'Quinn at the 4, and keep Melo at the 3. So I think that, and now keep in mind, Toronto got a few guys, because one guy that's obviously interesting is Melo without Porzingis, even though he's super priced up. But one guy that was something to keep in mind from the Toronto side is they have DeMar Carroll and PG Tucker. They got 2 decent defenders to stick on Melo if Melo does play the 3. So we're going to have to keep that in mind there. Anyway, moving on, we mentioned Kevin Durant. He's probable with a hand injury. I do believe this is the front end of a back-to-back for the Warriors, and I think they're playing the Wizards tomorrow, which is obviously a much more high-profile game. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them sit Durant. Or if Durant plays, I wouldn't be surprised to see them sit Klay or Steph. So if they don't sit anybody, there's really nobody that I want to play from the Golden State side just because they're all so expensive. And it just goes to show DraftKings is really sharpening up their prices, and these guys are all priced through the roof. Even Klay Thompson's at $7K. I don't know if I want to go there. Now, if Durant is out, I think we could look at a guy like Klay Thompson. Steph Curry, who is obviously in a monster spot if that were to happen. If Durant's out, Steph Curry's usage goes up and Klay Thompson's usage goes up the most. And Steph Curry at 9.9, I just don't think I could pull that trigger. Not on the road, not on the front of a back-to-back, so I'm not big on Curry today, even if Durant is out. I think if Durant plays, don't touch Curry. If Durant is out, Curry is a GPP only play. I wouldn't stick him in my cash games. He's just too expensive for me today. And Klay Thompson is the guy that I typically go to because he's typically more reachable with his price tag. So he's $7K, so he's another example. If we find out Durant is out, now if Durant plays, that obviously kind of ruins everything. But if Durant is out, I think that kind of is an obvious pivot for people to go off of DeRozan. He's $1,900 cheaper, and he's got a matchup against Philly. So I think people will flock to a guy like Klay over DeRozan. So that's what I mean, depending on the news we get. As of right now, I think DeRozan is going to be the chalky guy. But it's going to depend on all the news that we get because that could change. People could pivot right off of him. Jose Calderon, I think, was acquired by Golden State. He's questionable. I don't think that's too relevant either way. Joel Embiid's expected to miss this game. So I've been riding the Saric train. I haven't been on Covington too much, which has been a shame because they both have been going off. And now it's at a point where it might be too late to hop on Covington, and it might be a point where I might have to hop off Sarge. I don't want to, but especially if everybody plays on Golden State, it's going to be a little tougher. I don't think people realize Golden State is actually a pretty good defensive team. They do play fast, which is why they yield a lot of points because they just give the other team a lot of opportunities. But on paper, they're actually a really good defensive team. I think they might be one of the best in the best in the league. I'm not positive on that, but just based off my research I've done in the past, it's interesting. So when I'm looking at these guys' price, it just, we knew it was coming. I didn't know it would come this quick, but it's here. And what we see is Sarge, who's now power forward only, is 7.6K. So you're thinking, so you're basically assuming that he'll hit right around 40, which I think is doable. But keep in mind his matchup is going to be a little tougher today against Draymond. Now, since the All-Star break was over, since they traded Illy, he's been at over 42. They've only had 2 games, but he had over 42 in both those games. So does it seem reachable? Absolutely. Just keep in mind, though, his matchup's a little tougher today. He's going to have Draymond on him. So it's not going to be so easy. Whereas against New York, he pretty much had Melo, Quinn, guys like that. So, and then even against Washington, he had what's his name? Markieff Morris, who's not a very good defender. Of course, Covington is 7.3. He is a little bit cheaper, and he's been playing phenomenal as well. He's actually been playing better than Sarge. So I'm a little surprised there. He would be the guy drawing the matchup with Durant. So I think if Durant is out, I think I'm going to be all over Covington at 7.3. I think that's fine. It's more expensive than I'd like to pay, but based off the production, I mean, even going back before the All-Star break, Covington's been crushing. So now that he's pretty much guaranteed to get these, look at his minutes in the last 2 contests. On a back-to-back, right? The February 24th, they played Washington. February 25th, they played New York. So that's 2 games. 2 games in a row, he played 39 minutes each game. 39 minutes. He didn't even shoot well against New York. He was 2 for 11 from 3 against New York. That's 18.2% from 3. He still ended up with 47 DraftKings points. And so I think if I'm going to have to pick one guy, even though I like Sarge more, and if for any reason we find out Draymond's out or something, I'll be all over Sarge too. But I think Covington might be the guy. And there's another small forward that I think is going to be mega chalk that we're going to have to talk about, but we'll talk about him a little bit later. Avery Bradley is questionable with an Achilles. I doubt he's going to play. And if he does not play, I think it's finally time to hop back onto the Isaiah Thomas bandwagon over here, the IT2 train. Maybe we can call it that. Isaiah Thomas, his price finally came down to 8,700. He was 8,700 against Detroit, got 47.5 DraftKings points. That was actually last night. So you're going to certainly want to check the how Isaiah Thomas does on back-to-backs. You want to go to stats.nba.com and just look at Isaiah Thomas, and you can find his splits and how he does with no rest. But if Bradley is out, he's going to continue to be the guy. He's continued to be the guy. And, he was just priced way too high previously. I don't want to pay $9K for Isaiah Thomas. And I know it only seems like, but it's only $300 different. But that $300 difference can make or break you. That $300 difference is the difference between playing like a Klay Thompson and a Covington, right? And so I think that it is a big deal, that $300. And now that he's priced where he is, if we look at our raw projections on Isaiah Thomas, we see a number that agrees much more with that price. So his projected DraftKings points would be 47.12 based off his minute projection. He hits value at 48.72, and that's at about 5.5. So we're talking about a differential off raw projection of 1.6. Not to mention he's in a phenomenal matchup against Atlanta, who's really, really bad against guards in general. Point guards are right up there. So I think that if there's a time to hop back on Isaiah Thomas, I think it could be today. I think there's a much cheaper pivot. If Durant is out, I like Isaiah Thomas even more because I think people will kind of flock over to Thompson and Curry. And Isaiah Thomas is $1,200 cheaper than Curry. So I do think that I think IT2 is a solid play today. Now, again, I didn't check his how he does on back-to-backs. We're going to want to check that to make sure he can still play. I would assume so. Typically, guards don't get affected too much by that kind of stuff. But it does happen occasionally. Usually it's the big men who struggle with back-to-backs. So I still think he's going to be okay. But I love his price. I'll say that. I think in cash games, he's going to be up there to consider. Obviously, we have to wait to confirm that Bradley is out. But I think he's going to be somebody that I definitely consider going forward. For tonight's contest. Okay, Willie Reed is doubtful for Dallas. He got hurt in the last game, so I think that even though it's a pace down spot, it's a really ugly spot. I don't know we're missing a lot of spreads because we're waiting on a lot of injury news. This is one of the games where the spread and total are out, and we're looking at a 200 total. So yeah, it's supposed to be a close game, 1.5. Yeah, but the total is 200. It's gonna be, it's got to be the lowest slate on the board. I mean, the lowest total on the board by far, and it's 200. It's pretty ugly. So I'm not dying to target this game, but I will say with Willie Reed out, I think you can look to a guy like Whiteside, just because I think he's going to get a slight increase in minutes. Not that he doesn't, he plays a lot anyway. And but then again, Nerlens Noel is playing for Dallas. He should come off the bench, I would imagine. And GPPs, if you want to take a shot on him, I guess. I'm not going to go there. For a couple reasons. Number one, we don't know what his minutes is going to look like. We don't know how much he's playing. Number two, it's a pace down spot to begin with. So how many opportunities are we looking at here? So yeah, there's some guys who can play. Obviously, Seth Curry has been playing phenomenal. Yogi has been playing a lot of minutes, even though he hasn't been so hot. And Harrison Barnes, there's some good players on Dallas. It's just this is a pace down. This is a spot that seems to be really slow. Dallas is home, and I'm not really crazy about either side here. I think Dragic is in an incredible matchup as far as who's matching up with him. I think Waiters is in a pretty solid spot. So maybe GPPs, but again, that total is so low that it kind of pushes me back a little bit. Al Jefferson is questionable with his mouth against Houston. If he does not play, he's missed a couple games in a row. If he doesn't play, we've seen Lavoy Allen and some of these guys pick up his minutes, but the guy that I obviously am going to like the most is going to be the guy who starts at the center, which is Miles Turner. He's 6,100. I don't think that's a stretch at all. If you're looking at even if you want to do 6K, you're looking at about 37 DraftKings points in a pace-up spot on the road against Houston. I think that's definitely doable, without a doubt. So 6,100 is very interesting for Miles Turner. And if Al Jefferson is out, I think that kind of solidifies his minutes are going to remain ridiculously high. Aaron Aflalo is doubtful with a hamstring, and Garrett Temple is obviously out. So real quick, we'll talk about the Kings a little bit. That's a little confusing of a situation, just because they're obviously trying to tank, right? Like that's not a secret. I think that we all can kind of see that they're trying to tank. And the problem is, it's one thing to just have a crappy team and just go play these guys and say, hey, we'll see what happens, and if we tank, we tank. It's another thing when you're purposely trying to tank, and it seems to me like they're purposely trying to tank. I mean, they played Collison, who is now one of their best players on their team. They only played him 20-something minutes last game. That doesn't seem to me like a team that's trying to win. You would imagine you would see some of these starters, some of these guys really pick it up or have to play 40 minutes and show some of these new guys how they do it. They haven't been doing any of that. So it just seems to me like it's tricky to play any of these guys. Now, there is value there. Don't get me wrong. There is some value there, but it just seems tricky to kind of single anybody out and play any of them. Something I found out this morning. It sounds like the Knicks are actually going to waive Brandon Jennings. I think they're going to do that today. So from what I understand, it's because they want to try to sign, I can't say this, Chasen Randall or something like that, who's supposed to be some prospect. I think he plays for the Sixers right now, but in their D League. But they want to sign him. They think he's got something apparently, and they really want to sign him. So they're going to waive Brandon Jennings. I don't know if it's just one more way to wave that white flag, even though they're not that far out of the playoff hunt. There's not a lot of games left, and losing to Cleveland didn't help. And the fact that they blew what was it, like a 15-point lead they blew against Philly. They were lucky to win on a Carmelo shot. I don't know, but I will say I don't think Ron Baker, even though I am a fan of Baker, I don't see him getting significant run. So I think that Derrick Rose is a very interesting play, especially without Lowry. Not that Lowry is a fantastic, phenomenal defender, but he is pretty good, and in my opinion, he's probably better than Corey Joseph. So if Lowry is out, I think Rose becomes a phenomenal play today, just because his price he's priced right. I think he's like 6,300. He's been playing horribly. Don't get me wrong. He has not been playing well, but his price is low and his minutes. He played 36 minutes against Philly. He played 32 against Cleveland, and that was pretty much a blowout. So I would not be surprised. I mean, we know Rose has the upside in him. We know. And he played 38 minutes against Oklahoma City. That's Westbrook. And he put up 43 points. Not that it's hard to score on Westbrook, but I think at 6,300, his price came down. At Philly, he was 67. His price came down to 63, and Lowry is probably not going to play. So I think Derrick Rose, if Lowry is out, I think Derrick Rose is a solid cash game play today, especially with the news that we just heard about Jennings. So that's something to consider. So real quick, just a couple guys I wanted to talk about just in general. Wow, I just realized Tyreek Evans is point guard eligible. That's funny. So real quick, just some insight on the slate itself. I'm not really gonna go position by position because we're running a little low on time. I'll mention a couple players that I thought were interesting, but obviously you got James Harden. He's 12K. I don't think that's too bad of a price on DraftKings. I really don't. I think on FanDuel he's overpriced. I'm not sure what he is, but the projections aren't crazy about his value. But James Harden needs to hit value at 5.5x. He's 67.2 DraftKings points. He's projected rawly on a raw projection basis. He's projected for 60.34. That's not bad. 6.86 differential. So, and you factor in the fact that he's in a good matchup at home. I think Harden is a solid GPP play today. I don't know if I'm willing to put him in my cash games unless we see significant value open up. If significant value opens up, then sure, I can see merit in playing him. But I wouldn't force any value just to play James Harden. I really wouldn't. If there's no value that truly opens up, I'd rather go with the mid tier. Now, let's talk. We're talking about value. We're talking about James Harden. Let's talk about that game in general. That game has got to be the chalk of the night, I would imagine. Number one, we're missing 3 totals out of the 7 games. So that's going to freak people out a little bit, even though I think we'll get the information well before lock, obviously. Number two, the Rockets and Pacers have an extremely high total. Now, the spread is 10, but over the last 2 games, the Rockets were favored by double digits, and the game stayed pretty close for most of the game. So, and the scoring has been ridiculous. So I would be very, very surprised if people were not stacking up this game every which way. And on top of that, the Indiana guys seem to be a bit underpriced to me. I mean, the small forward I was talking about earlier when I was mentioning there's another guy that I think is going to be mega chalky. And I like this guy, and he'll probably make my cash games because he's so cheap. Paul George, 7,700. Now, listen, Paul George got ejected in his last contest. So I do think that we're dealing with an issue here. And the issue we're dealing with is Paul George isn't happy. I think, from what I understand, number one, he wanted to go to the Lakers. He wanted to be traded to the Lakers. Number two, I think what he's really upset about, aside from not being traded, I think he's more upset with the fact that he wasn't really included in the trade talks. Now, I don't think the Pacers owe him anything. I really don't. I don't think it's a situation where, he should be upset. It's the name of the game. You're getting paid millions of dollars to play basketball. What are you upset about, whether they trade you or not? Now, granted, I like Paul George a lot. I think he's a very good player. I think he's severely underrated. But at the same time, I don't care unless you're LeBron James, literally. Unless you're literally LeBron James, dude, you don't do that. Now, if you're smart enough like Carmelo Anthony to get a no trade clause, it's one thing. But don't do that, man. Come on. And he's not, anyway, going back to what I should be talking about. He's 7.7K. That's way too cheap in this pace-up spot. Massive pace-up spot. Paul George is a huge part of this offense. I think him and Jeff Teague are both severely in play. Obviously, Jeff Teague might have a tougher matchup with Beverly, but Beverly is not going to play the whole game. Teague is going to play a lot of minutes here, and I think you have Ariza on Paul George. I'm not too worried about that. Ariza is a decent defender, but overall, I think Paul George can do whatever he wants here. So I really like Paul George, especially after being embarrassed. Now, hold on. He has not been playing very well. I'll admit that. Since coming back from the All-Star break, he got 26.75 DraftKings points, but that was against Memphis, right? And then, of course, he got 10.75 DraftKings points, but he only played 19 minutes against Miami, another slower-paced team. So I think this is a phenomenal spot for George at 7.7. He will be on my cash game teams. Him and Covington are probably my favorite small forwards of the night. But yeah. So aside from Paul George, there is plenty. We were talking about value in this game. There is still a lot of value. Shooting guards, Monte Ellis is 4K. CJ Miles, 3.8K. Glenn Robinson is the minimum at 3K. So there are some ways to go. Now, I think the Houston side is priced up a little bit more. I think their prices seem a bit more accurate. Like Lou Williams is 5,400. Eric Gordon is 5K. So, I mean, Eric Gordon's not bad. But anyway, my point is, in this game in general, considering how high the spread is, how high the total is, these guys all seem way underpriced. So I think this is where your chalk's going to be. This is where your value is going to come from. I'm talking cash games. In GPPs, you might want to find some pivots or maybe take a balanced approach. But in cash games, unless we hear these late news opening up, in my opinion, it just seems like a no-brainer for people to just play like a guy like Monte Ellis, who's only 4K and is probably going to play minimum 24 minutes. Or a CJ Miles, who's 3.8K and who's also going to play minimum 22 minutes. Even Glenn Robinson, who has a shot, who typically plays in the 20s. If he plays 24 minutes, he's the minimum. He is the minimum. Is he bad? Sure. Does he do much? No. but he's the minimum. You only need 15 points for him to hit 5x. So these are guys that are kind of obvious. These are the guys that I think as of right now, the build, until we hear news, I think the build everybody's going to go to is try to stack as much of the value from the Indian-Houston game, including Paul George, throw in DeRozan, and go from there. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to find out some weird injury news later, like we're going to find out LeBron is sitting, or we're going to find out Durant is out or something. And then it's going to get all mixed up and pivoted, and people are going to pivot to they're going to pivot off of guys like DeRozan. So that's just my prediction. That's just what I could see happening. Obviously, if there's no news, that may not happen. But yeah. So anyway, I know we didn't talk about too many players today. I wanted to more get through the injury stuff and just kind of see the overall approach of what we could do at this slate. But it's tough. You could see it's hard. And, there's a reason I didn't have too many guys. I could sit here and talk about guys all day. I can name them. Schroeder's in a good spot against IT2. Marcus Smart is interesting at 5.6. Jeff Teague, 6.9. We talked about Dragic at 6.8 against Dallas. Giannis at 10.7 against Cleveland. I didn't even talk about Giannis. Giannis is in a phenomenal spot here. Especially if LeBron's out, Giannis is going to crush. So there's a lot of guys you can talk about. You don't need me to tell you what NBA players are good. Most likely, you know enough about the NBA to know which NBA players are good. I'm just trying to figure out what the best approach is to attack this slate. And I'm not saying I know that. I don't. And I'm having a hard time setting my dummy lineups just because there really is no value, and there are a lot of studs that I'd like to get in there. There's a lot of different, and there's so much news we don't know. There are out of the 7 games today, 3 of them don't have lines as of right. It's about 9:42 in the morning on the East Coast. There are no lines for 3 out of the 7 games. So there's a lot of uncertainty that we're waiting for, and we're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But anyway, that's going to do it for us here at WiseTake.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button. We really appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Podbean, give us a follow, leave us some comments. And if you're listening on iTunes, please subscribe to the channel. Rate us, review us, bump us up those charts. We really appreciate it. I'm working on getting a few guests on the podcast. We have a couple lined up this week. I don't want to make any promises just because we've had a couple hiccups along the way. So we do have a couple guys that I'm considering bringing in, and I'm working on it. So hopefully we can have some interesting dialogue going over those shows. It won't be tomorrow, I can tell you that, but we'll see about maybe Wednesday or Thursday. No promises, but we will see. Anyway, guys, if you're not a member of WiseTake.com, please go to WiseTake.com. Now, membership is free. You get access to our free raw projections. We got a forums on there I'm trying to get going. We're trying to start a little DFS community here, guys. And in order for a community to work, you got to communicate with each other. So if you could help me out, that'd be great. If you have any questions for me, you could always reach out to me on Twitter. I'm always open to talk to anybody about DFS. Obviously, the WiseTake Twitter is the best way to keep up with the WiseTake updates and the podcast itself. Anyway, guys, I really, again, appreciate you guys watching. I look forward to doing this every day. Love coming on here, talking to you guys. Love talking DFS. So, as they say, pricing is harder, so be careful if you need to scale back today. If you need to scale back for like a week or so just to kind of feel it out, I'm with you. I've been scaling it back. I was on a crazy hot streak after the All-Star break, and then over the weekend, I just lost 2 nights in a row. So I'm scaling it back a little bit. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me today. Again, I know I say it a million times, but I just appreciate it that much. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, good luck.